Hey students, this is Unit 3, Lesson 3, Cognitive Development. We're going to focus on the theories of John Piaget, who's pictured here in the middle. And while we do it, we're going to identify key features in cognitive development. Before we do that, let's recap the necessity for attachment. Remember that attachment is essential for social and cognitive development. Research does show, based on those Romanian orphanages and things we've seen throughout, that orphans without attachment with adults have lower IQ scores and have higher anxiety disorders. And so their abilities to adjust based on the fact that they didn't get the care they needed when they were a child is disrupted. We also see, based on Harry Harlow's research, that the unloved become unloving. So they may abuse their children, unfortunately. Some murderers report being neglected as children. 30% of abused children become abusers themselves because it's all they know. And the physically and sexually abused oftentimes have greater disorders, health problems, abuse, and criminality. So attachment, definitely a key feature for ages, well, from birth until childhood, through childhood. We focus on cognitive development. Remember, cognition is thinking. How do we think? Well, Piaget believed we think in stages. He came to this conclusion after working with children at the Binet Institute in France. This is where he asked many children the same questions over the course of these intelligence tests, and he began to see that children that were certain ages would answer similarly, and they wouldn't get questions wrong, they would just get them not right. And their reasoning oftentimes was similar based on their age. Piaget himself was a child genius, and so he was particularly interested in how we think. People treated him when he was young as kind of like a little adult because he was just brilliant. But he knew, I'm a kid, what the heck? So as he grew older, he developed these theories and dedicated his life to cultivating these theories. His stages of cognitive development go in 4 stages. And the first stage is sensory motor stage. And it is what it sounds like, that we experience the world when we are born from the age of 0 to 2 through our senses, because it's all we know. Remember that when children are born, they're born with their primitive brain, and that's about it. The children are completely dependent upon older human beings to care for them. And so they live in the present. One of the key features of this stage is something known as object permanence. And so object permanence is understanding that an object exists even though it can't be seen and touched. In this picture, there is a mom who's going to hide this ball, and the baby doesn't understand where it goes. She puts it under a pillow, and the baby looks around inquisitively, like, where the heck did the ball go? And then it gets a little agitated when it can't find the ball. So it never occurs to the baby that it could look for the ball itself, because they're vulnerable. They depend on other people to care for them. So in the early stage, we're experiencing the world through our senses. We stay in the present moment, and we're unable to think beyond that. The second stage is known as a pre-operational stage. And here, this is the ages of 2 to 6. Children begin to use language and symbols. This is when we start to believe in make-believe and in play. We might take on different roles when we're playing. We also believe things like something called animism, like our stuffed animals actually have a life of their own. I remember believing that people lived in the radio. This, of course, is false, but we have mental imagery. We can picture things in our mind, but we also have this thing known as egocentrism. And that's where we see I see my display, you must see what I'm seeing as well. And we're unable to put ourselves in other people's shoes. I'll show you what that looks like in this video in class, but egocentrism is the inability to see things from another person's viewpoint. Another key feature of the pre-operational stage is the law of conservation. In the law of conservation, we're unable to envision, like, these 2 glasses have the same amount of water in them, but she's going to pour this amount into this taller glass. And this little girl believes that because this water gets poured into the bigger glass, that suddenly this is more. Just because it's taller must signify that there's more water. Well, we know, because we're beyond the pre-operational stage, that that's simply not correct. but she doesn't know that because she's unable to make the connection between that things don't change their quantity despite the change in size. Now, this child's able to tell us that just because this cup gets poured into here, that the amount doesn't change. But further on, she's unable to tell us some basic other things of changes. This is the concrete operational stage. So she has obviously advanced beyond concrete operations, but you're going to see a child in the next clip who has not. They're unable to think abstractly and to make substitutions for information by doing basic elementary. Like this example, 6 minus 2 equals 4 because 4 plus 2 equals 6. Like a concrete operational stage child may not be able to switch those numbers around. We can do that when we reach formal operations, and that's the stage that Jean Piaget would say that you're in, though some people may vacillate between concrete and formal operations. But for us, we are able to think abstractly. We can think into the future. We can like substitute information and think of what ifs, like what if the Nazis had won World War II, stuff like that. We can think abstractly and think of several different approaches to solving problems. We can formulate personal ideas and values because now we are not necessarily dependent upon another human being for our survival. Now, by age 12, we can reason things out and make plan for the future. Like, okay, winter is coming. I need to put away all the rice that I can because I'm going to need it later on. All right, here we're going to make a transition into how we actually come to this knowledge. How does the thinking develop? Well, again, Piaget believed this happens in stages and believed that children organize new information in two ways. We assimilate new information and a process by which new information is placed into pre-existing categories or schemas. Let me give you an example. When you were young, you learned what a dog was because maybe you had a family dog and it was a dachshund. Well, you and your family are out for a walk and then suddenly you come across another dog, but it's a different type. This is a Great Dane. A huge contrast between a dachshund. And your parents say, or your family says, that's a Great Dane, but it's also a dog. So you assimilate this new information into your existing category or schema. Now I know that dogs come in different shapes and sizes, albeit they are four-legged creatures. I know a dog, I know a dachshund from a Great Dane. And then we make accommodations. The accommodation is the process of adjusting existing ways of thinking or schema to understand new information. So let's say as you're out for that walk, you come across a cat and the child says, that's a dog. Well, somebody is there to say, no, that's a cat. While it's got fur, it's got four legs, it is a different category. And so we accommodate new information to create new schemas and new ways of thinking about four-legged creatures. This whole process for us is happening all the time. We're constantly putting things into our categories, our schemas that we are not even aware of. Like this stuff happens without us consciously processing it because our brain is so powerful and cool. Much of this is going to revolve around the types of parenting styles that our parents have adopted for us. They can be different per child. I am a middle child. Did my parents treat me differently than my older and younger siblings? Heck yeah. Some things work and some things don't. So our parents adopt these different styles per child, per maybe stage of life that they're in. But there are generally three types, and this was a concept by a female theorist named Baumrind. The parenting style of authoritarian is just like it sounds like. You do it because I say so, you'll be grounded. These are ones that are very firm because I said so. Permissive parents are those that let the child set the rules. Permissive parents are going to let a kid do basically whatever they want. You can drink, just do it in my house, stuff like that. And an authoritative is both demanding and responsive. And so they're going to say, you're going to go to college, but you get to choose where you go. They set rules, but they often explain those rules that they're for the best and allow children to give some viewpoints into maybe their punishments. And they say that authoritative parents raise children with higher self-esteem, self-reliance, social skills, and are achievement oriented. Now, you all probably know friends who have one of these parenting styles. You know the authoritarian, you know the permissive, and you know the authoritative. And you also probably can easily identify which parenting style that you are growing up with. Sometimes my parents were a blend of authoritarian and permissive, but ultimately became authoritative. All right, our cognitive development also includes how we think about morality. And morality, it was theorized about by this man, Lawrence Kohlberg, whose backstory is really cool. He devised a theory relating to a child's moral reasoning. Now, what's moral reasoning? The right or wrong. What is right or wrong? Judgment. So he believed that this also occurred in stages similar to Piaget, that children advance at different rates, and not everyone reaches the highest level of moral reasoning that Kohlberg highlighted. He used this situation to define his moral reasoning. So a woman was near death from cancer. One drug might save her life. This is known as the Heinz story. So Heinz had a sick wife. He went to the druggist to get the drug. The druggist wouldn't sell it to him because he didn't have enough money. And Heinz, should he go steal the money? Should he borrow the money? All in all, wife's going to die if he doesn't get the money. So what should Heinz do? Should he steal it? Should he borrow it? What's going to happen? Well, your answer would tell Lawrence Kohlberg where you lie in this stage of moral reasoning. I'm not going to read all this to you because it's a lot and we will end up recapping in class. But many of us, Kohlberg says, we don't make it up here because, well, cognitive development, we just don't get there. That's a brief introduction to cognitive development. And of course, we'll be doing more reasoning, more thinking about this